Howdy, y'all. Joe Hills here, recording as I always do in Nashville, Tennessee, and in today's episode of Hermitcraft, we're going to discuss prophets. No, not money, but people who try to affect change. Now, a lot of you guys might not know this, but the word prophet is actually from a Greek word that means advocate, which is obviously linked to the concept of advocating or recommending some sort of change. And I'm going to help you identify what makes a good prophet, what makes a false prophet, and if you want to apply this to identifying false prophets in your own life, well, then that might be helpful. If you want to, apply this toward becoming a good prophet, I mean, it's not my job to tell you whether you're a prophet or not, but I figure any tips that you get along the way, you can always attribute to whatever divine power, gave you the idea to come here for that advice by watching this video. So, let's just look at some notes. First thing about prophets. To be a real prophet, it needs to be your full-time job. You need to get people to buy your food for you. If somebody is, coming up to you and is just like, oh, I don't have any material possessions, and let me tell you about my belief system, and, by the way, I don't have money for dinner, they're probably a prophet. That's one good way to identify if somebody is in the business of prophesying. Now, that doesn't tell you whether they're a good prophet or not, but it does give you an idea of where they are on the prophet to not a prophet spectrum. It's not like they're clearly marked non-profit organization type thing. You just don't know. You gotta ask. And if you don't want to ask, you gotta pay attention to what they're asking from you. Now, a good prophet will often try to call attention to themselves through public demonstrations of weirdness. Like, they'll walk around without shoes or with, sackcloth on or some sort of... They'll do something different. Like, for example, in the film Forrest Gump was mistaken for a prophet because he decided to go running across the country. He was really just kind of bored and also crazy. And, people just saw that guy running forever, and they thought, man, he's got to have some sort of message. And what it shows is a defiance of the herd mentality to the extreme. Now, the prophet demonstrates oh, yeah, I don't have to live like everybody else. But at the same time, the degree to which they go crazy, doing weird stuff, is so extreme that it could not obviously be expected of their followers. It's only because, they are the prophet of whatever this message is that they are, doing this. And isn't it nice that they'll get to do all this weird stuff, so you don't have to. You can just follow the more normal beliefs of that prophet. Now, another thing about prophets is they build on tradition and household names, like Isaiah or Seth Bling, If Seth Bling had said at one point, one day somebody's going to make a more compact piston door than this, then it would be up to the person, to say, okay, well, Seth Bling believes that this is possible. And other people listen to Seth Bling. So all I need to do is just make a piston door that is indeed more compact, and then I will look like this fulfillment of this aforementioned prophecy. Seth Bling might care nothing for me or my design. In fact, he might even find it repugnant. But the fact that somebody that people respect and know and like has mentioned, that this was gonna happen sooner or later, they see my arrival with my piston door as a fulfillment of that prophecy. And a lot of times at that point, the cat is out of the bag. It is too late for Seth Bling to just be like, yeah, that's not the compact piston door I was imagining, guys, because by then, it's already gone too far. Now, other, possible prophecies you could fulfill is Generic B saying somebody will eventually be funny on this server. Hey, maybe I did that. I don't know. So, why do we need a new prophecy or a new prophet now? Now, one thing that's important for prophets is to justify their existence. All that not having money for food and things like that doesn't pay for itself. So, what you want to do is you want to be a new prophet at a point when the old prophecy has run out. Once again, or like it has failed in some way. So, if somebody, said, if some famous person that everyone respects said, okay, guys, everything's going to be fine, and then it isn't fine, if there's a massive economic collapse or something like that, what you want to do is you want to capitalize on that, or be alert for people capitalizing on that, in terms of, false prophets, and just be kind of clearly we were led down a false path, or we've reached the end of that path and we must now choose another. The old ways were good when we were old. No, when we were young. But now that we have matured, we must follow a new direction. One direction, true believers. And, something like that. And so you gotta justify this. And also, you should not be an actually terrible person if you're planning on being a prophet. If you are a terrible person, you're already in the false prophet category. Just pro tip. Also, if someone's a terrible person who's a prophet, yeah, false prophet. You can safely decry them. They are clearly not one to follow. Okay, so things that you want to predict are either things that you know will happen or things you know that you need to happen for you to be relevant. Like, for example, if you're somebody who is planning on, making your prophetic mark via economics, back to that economic downturn argument, well, you need an actual economic downturn in order to justify the changes you're making, because when an economy is running fine, nobody wants to touch it, right? So that's a case where the prophet needs their prophecy to be true in order for people to be receptive anyway. And that's a bit of a gamble, because if the economy doesn't make a downturn in the time allotted, then you're out of luck and not a prophet after all. Now, other things you can prophesy are things that you know are going to happen anyway. Like, for example, if you are really good at astronomy and you know there's going to be an eclipse, and all the peasants or the spellbinders or whatever don't know that, like Paul Reynolds in the Australian-Polish crossover TV show Spellbinder. This guy is from our planet. He goes to another alternate universe planet, and they don't know when the eclipse is going to happen because they don't keep track of that stuff. He does, so everybody thinks he's like this amazing genius wizard guy. Really, he just happened to read an almanac in our world. So that's an example of secret knowledge. You can also bluff, or like V for Vendetta, you can actually set up what you're going to do. Like, in his case, he was like, okay, well, the parliament is going to be destroyed. And everybody's like, whoa, really? And then it happened because he set that up. That is essentially a confidence game where he didn't really bluff, per se. He knew it was going to happen because he set it up in the background, which is kind of cheating, but you can do it. And then there's also cases like Chryses from the Iliad by Homer, who predicted that if they did not return his daughter, a terrible pestilence would befall the camp. And, of course, our Lord King Agamemnon of Atreus' line just completely ignored Chryses, which resulted in a crisis in which a pestilence befell the camp. Now, here's the thing about this. Chryses is a pretty smart guy. He's a healer. He's a medicine man. He walks into this camp where there's tens of thousands of people. They don't have proper sewage, plumbing. They're not washing themselves. He can say that pestilence is going to break out among the camp, and then there's a pretty good chance it's gonna. And then, if in order to cleanse themselves of the pestilence later, he could make a suggestion along the lines of each person must walk into the sea and wash themselves of their sin or something like that. Well, and they must do this every day for a month and the pestilence will pass. That's kind of just cleaning yourself. That's basic sanitation. And I don't think that's what Chryses actually did in the book, but that's an example of how you can use knowledge that you have to be a better prophet and whatnot. Now, other things about profitability is it needs to scale. You need to be able to reach more folks over time. You can't just go over here and be like, okay, well, I'm going to keep walking around and eventually, things will work out for me. Because, pro tip, things don't just naturally work out for people. They have to, kind of develop, and there has to be planning involved. And the one guy walking around works well if you're in a small area, but once you start spreading out, you need to spread in multiple directions. And in order to do that, you need to allocate resources, which are usually, in the case of a prophet, gonna be people. And that's why, prophets and cult leaders and all them folks usually have some sort of entourage, but then they also can send the entourage out to do things for people. And one of my favorite examples, now you got to train these people. In the same way that FedEx ostensibly will tell their delivery guys, here's what you should and should not do when delivering a package, to make sure they don't do anything stupid, like, check to see if the door's unlocked and then just leave the package inside, because they might be opening the door on somebody who's got a shotgun or, whatever. FedEx shouldn't check to see if your door's unlocked. That's a bad idea. So they train these people. Now, the thing is that even when you try and train these people, you don't know what they're going to do. You need to make sure you open it up to questions, right? There's a good part of the Bible, in fact, my favorite part of the Bible, when Jesus is about to send some folks out to spread his mission, and he kind of lets them know that they now have the power to heal people and things like that. And they kind of ask, like, whoa, that's really cool, but, like, if they won't listen to us, Can we like burn their village? Do we have that ability? And pro tip, you don't have to have magic powers to burn a village. We did it in Vietnam, and it was a bad idea then, okay? That is a bad thing. Okay, it's bad on several levels. One, anybody can burn a village. And two, nobody should burn a village. Do not burn villages, people. This is just basic, like, humanity, as well as public relations. Like, don't burn cities. And, like, the Christ is just kind of, like, facepalm. He is just shocked at how idiotic these folks are. And so, like, because here's the thing, is if you send people out and they've got this, like, violent agenda, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna bash some skulls in and we're gonna get things done, and we're gonna burn villages. That's how you cultivate a I don't know, what would you call it? A terrorist classification. That's how you get the Roman government or the United States government or any government really to just say, yeah, you people are terrible and we're going to hunt you down, and then the entire population gets behind that because, oh yeah, you just burned a village. Never burn villages. In fact, that's the biggest takeaway for this whole video, is if you have an opportunity to just destroy a whole bunch of things very quickly, do not do that, okay? It doesn't matter what kind of position of authority you are in. Do not do that. Okay, sorry, I kind of got sidetracked here, but don't burn villages. Okay, so other things you need to do is you need to give your followers a chance to make little changes in their life. And you need to make these little changes ways that they can distinguish themselves from others. Like, they can feel like they're part of the club in the same way that the prophet does something that's super crazy mega weird. They can do something that's kind of a little bit deviant or different from the norm. And then they can feel like, whoa, I'm this really cool person because I have, X, Y, or Z that's different about me from all those other, hive mind sheep people. And ideally, these things should not be things that benefit the prophet. Like, if the prophet is saying, like, oh yeah, our belief system that makes us different from everybody else is that you guys give me 50% of your money or all of your money. Don't do that. Don't ever ask people to do that. Like, it's just wrong. And don't follow anybody who's just like, oh yeah, you absolutely must do this. Sometimes folks want to support people, and that's fine, but when people are just like, this is an underlying tenet of what we do, you gotta question that. You gotta. But anyway, so these little things that you ask people to give up should be offset with obvious positive results. Like, for example, in a lot of faiths, they would ask people to not eat either certain types of meat or not have meat on certain days. And one of the benefits of that is that meat is super expensive. And so in addition to feeling like, oh, okay, you're really cool or whatever, you've just saved, let's say you don't have meat one day a week. You've saved 1/7 of what you would spend on meat every week, which is now extra money you have to go enjoy other things or to theoretically support that cause if you so choose. Now, the other religions and faiths and whatnot will ask you to give up things like alcohol or gambling, and that has the same effect. I personally enjoy playing games. I don't really, I don't do any sort of like money gambling like blackjack or whatever at the real casinos. Like, I've been to Vegas, but I don't have extra money to gamble away. I can't afford that. But I don't think there's anything, like, wrong about gambling. But the benefit of teaching people that they should not gamble is because some people already have gambling problems. And the easiest way to beat some sort of addiction like that can be to throw wild-eyed devotion at it. And so all of a sudden, somebody's got all this extra money because they're not wasting it all on gambling. They're happier at home because their wife isn't mad at them for wasting all their money on gambling. And when they ask themselves, like, oh, am I better off now that I'm following this prophet person? The answer is yes, because I'm not throwing all my money into alcohol and gambling. It's one of those things. You can tell people, you can ask people to volunteer to make sacrifices that make their lives better, make them feel empowered. And then when they feel like they're in control of some element of their life and they see that they can improve some element of their life, they can then suffer other problems more bravely, and they can rejoice in those victories as their own. They'll say, oh yeah, I'm following this prophet or whatever who told me not to do this, and you know what? It made my life better. This is how, like, diets work. This is how all sorts of, like the Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey, a lot of this stuff, you're going to see these kind of prophetic tropes repeated again and again in real life. And it's so important to be able to recognize when they are being applied so you can make sure that because they can have real advantages, it's fine to jump on board with these things, but you need to be in control of your life. You need to understand when you are taking advantage of an opportunity to improve your life and when you're being taken advantage of to benefit the life of a prophet. Because a good prophet should not be exploiting you. Really, a good person should not be exploiting you. So we're going to go back here to this one that says you need to not actually be a terrible person. Anybody that asks you to be a terrible person is a terrible person. Do not listen to them. You do not need to listen to them. That, just reiterating that. I don't actually have a sign that says don't burn villages, but I'm really wishing I did now. Anyway, so back to being a successful prophet, it's important to be able to delegate things. You know, I talked about a good prophet seeking profiteers and training them properly. You need to give them both the message and the mechanism. Not only what to say, but how to say it. Like, you know, for example, in my case, I'm not a prophet, quote unquote, but there's actually a lot of overlap between YouTube personality and profiting, which is one of the reasons I kind of started thinking about this. Now, in my case, it would be like, oh, you should tell people that Joe Hills is a cool YouTuber. And the mechanism for that is to click like on my videos and to share them on Twitter. And so that way, that's something that if you do that, you know, that's cool, that helps me, but it doesn't really, where the prophet analogy kind of falls short there is it doesn't necessarily improve your life. Like when somebody asks you to do something for them, you need to think about, okay, how does that benefit them? And how does that benefit me? Like, if you like my videos and you think like, oh, okay, it would be cool if Joe had more subscribers because then he could do this full time and then he could make better videos. You know, that would benefit you in the long term. And so you click like and you click share or whatever. But if you're just like, well, you know, I don't really need better videos from Joe Hills. I don't need anything from Joe Hills. I'm going to click dislike on this video right now, actually, because what the heck is he talking about? This is terrible. You don't have to do anything like that. Just because somebody seems like they know what they're doing and they've predicted the future once or twice, it's really easy to predict the future once or twice. If you have enough people trying to predict the future 3 times in the next 3 months, somebody's going to get darn close, okay? It doesn't matter what proof you've seen that somebody is excellent or is amazing and that you should just go out there and wildly support them. Look at not only what they have done and what they have said, but what they are saying and what they are doing. And your time has value. You always need to remember that you are valuable. If you were not valuable, advertisers would not spend all the money they do trying to get everything that they can possibly find out about you. Politicians would not spend all this time riding around to your little Waffle Houses and trying to get you to vote for them. And they wouldn't spend all this time trying to get you to not pay attention to what they're doing with surveillance or with torture or anything like that. You are important. And so you need to guard your time jealously. You need to find what you want to do. You need to figure out who you want to follow so that you can become a better leader later, or how you can be a better follower. How can you make the most people's lives not terrible? And maybe watching my videos is a waste of your time. And that's okay. Don't do it. You know? But, okay, so let's get off my videos and come on over here and say, here's something that I've been thinking about, is if you are going to be a prophet, or here, if you're going to look to a prophet, you should find somebody who's not necessarily saying what you want to hear, but saying what you want to see, what you want to happen. Because people who are prophesying doom and gloom, people who are saying there's going to be a nuclear apocalypse, unfortunately will require a nuclear apocalypse. If we go all the way back here to the things that people, predict things you know will happen or things you need to happen for you to be relevant. If you have somebody who is only relevant by causing a nuclear apocalypse, possibly inadvertently through policy pressure or things like that, that's bad. Okay? You need to find somebody. Somebody might say there will be a nuclear apocalypse if we do not avoid these things. You know, they're not prophesying nuclear apocalypse is unavoidable. They're saying we can disarm or we can do this or that. But here's what we need to do. We need to fix it in these ways. Their goal needs to be demonstrating that these things are avoidable. People who say that horrific things happen and it is unavoidable are defeatist. And really, do you want your prophet to be a defeatist, or do you want your prophet to be a winner? Okay? Find somebody who's saying things that you want to happen and then help make them happen. Because that's the other thing about prophets, is when they say like, oh yeah, if people come together, then we can avoid this problem. And then they convince enough people to come together and avoid that problem. Not only have they delegated well, but they've also made a prediction of things that they, need to happen to stay relevant. They're not a terrible person because they're making good things happen. And they're making people feel empowered because, oh, hey, we just beat something that was terrible. That's pretty good. That is a good prophet. Also, as prophets should plan to be persecuted and have a plan to benefit from that attention, okay? If you know that you're saying something that's not politically viable, and it's going to make people mad, a prophet should know how to leverage the resultant press coverage in order to draw attention to what they're doing. And a lot of, if you look at a lot of civil rights leaders, they knew that they were going to be arrested. And they turned those arrests into publicity. And then they would go out and they would have huge protests and there would be massive arrests again. And all it did was make the government look unreasonable. The same thing happened in Canada. A bunch of students were complaining tuition went up, and they got arrested. And a bunch of people who didn't care about tuition going up, all of a sudden they decided, hey, I don't think we should be arresting protesters. And so people who had no concern at all about this tuition issue are suddenly out in the streets banging pots and pans like there's no tomorrow, saying, hey, it's not okay to arrest people. And then the police arrested them, and things spiraled out of control. This idea of, these Waco people, people who set up these compounds and tell the federal government, oh, you'll never take me alive, and don't stockpile weapons, okay? That's a good way to get killed, and it's terrible publicity. Never. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to say that again. Never stockpile weapons. It's a bad idea. If you are trying to affect some sort of change, then you need to seek nonviolent ways to accomplish it, okay? Nonviolent. If you're nonviolent, you don't need weapons. You don't need them for defense. And you know what? You don't even want to... Essentially, any weapons you have are ironically ammunition for the people that want to shut you up. Because it's like, oh, look at those crazy cult extremists over there with their guns that they only use to hunt deer for food. You know what? Don't find an alternate source of food Or, you know what, give up meat or something. Don't hunt deer with guns, because, you know, those guns will be used against you in, you know, a legal sense. And also, it helps to, you know, have your message linked to some sort of appeal to a broader, like a higher authority or higher power. And for a lot of prophets traditionally, that's been some sort of religion or something like that. But, you know, these days, not everything has to be about religion. You know, it can be about justice or about building a better world. Like, if you have some sort of goal like that, you know, people are going to decry it for being, like, not very specific. So the problem there is you gotta kind of find that right balance, the proper balance between sounding like you are lazy. It's like, oh yeah, we want to make the world a better place, and you know, sounding like you don't really know what you're doing. You know, a lot of people claim that the Occupy movement really didn't understand what it was trying to accomplish, and they didn't really have a set policy goal. Which was a real thing that happened. They didn't have any. They just knew that something was wrong, and they knew that they wanted to appeal to people's sense of justice. But unfortunately, they existed in a reality where injustice had been the norm for so long that it just seemed unfocused. It's like, well, everybody knows things are terrible for most people. That's what an economic downturn is. I don't really see where you're going with this. And so, you know, having that deeper message locked down up front can really help you avoid that kind of media failure. So I don't know really what this video is, if it's a tutorial on how to be a good prophet or how to identify false prophets or how to avoid being conned or scammed by somebody pretending to know more than they do. But I hope that you took something away from this. This is just what goes on inside my head. I'll just think about things, and this was the result of me thinking like, you know, back in the day, there were a lot of prophets. Islam claims there were about 250,000 of them, and other religions claim, you know, hundreds of thousands of prophets have lived and died throughout the ages, and that seems like a lot. And so if there's any truth of that, if there's any kernel of truth in that, then who knows? One of you might be the next prophet or might be about to get conned by the next prophet. So I hope that you have managed to internalize some of this, and if you like, you might share this video with your friends. If you don't like, then be your own person and, you know, don't listen to me. That is okay. Anyway, until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. Keep adventuring.